Hey guys, welcome back. This is the lecture number 74 from our bootcamp series. In the last lecture, we discussed helpers in brief, and in this lecture, we will learn how to write helper methods in a controller. So, this is very simple. So, let's write a helper method inside the student's controller. So, to write that helper method, first open the student's controller, and in the student's controller, you can write that method below the our callback action. Okay, so before action, what we need to write first, that write helper method. Okay, just make sure that do not write helper action, just write helper method. Okay, and now the method name, formatted date. We will use the same method which we implemented yesterday for formatting the student's date of birth. Okay, because the purpose is just to show how to write helper methods inside the controller. Okay, so now let's implement this first. Okay, so here you can see that we have the same method in application helper, that is formatted date. Okay, so just copy this method from here, comment this, and save this file. Okay, now this method will not work, and just replace it. Just close this. Okay, now when you refresh the students page, because we have the same call format date student date of birth here. Okay, so if we refresh the page now, we will get an error because we removed that method from application helper. So let's try to see this on students show page. Here you can see that I am at the show page of the students resource. Okay, now when I refresh the page, I will get the error that undefined method formatted date. Why? Because I am calling this method on view, but I remove this method from the application controller, application helper. Okay, now since we just removed this method from helper, then and we defined a helper method formatted date inside the students controller. Okay, so now let's implement this helper method inside the students controller. So what we need to write, def formatted date, and just like we doing in the application helper, accept an argument date here. Okay, and then on the date object or the date argument, you can copy the same line. Okay, so just copy this and paste it into the formatted date action method inside the controller. Okay, so save it. So here I'm repeating one more thing, that helper methods defined inside the controller are not treated as the other actions defined into the controller. Okay, here you can see that like index, new, create, edit, show, update, and destroy are the actions. Okay, not the methods. But these things like student params or whatever you define in the private section or then the private area is known as the methods only. Okay, they are not the request. Okay, so similarly the formatted date we define here is not a action, it is just a method, and we define this helper method formatted date here. Okay, now save this. Okay, and refresh the students detail page now. Okay, now you can see that even we remove this formatted date method from the application helper, we can still see the formatted date of birth of a student. Why? Because we added the helper method inside the student's controller. Okay, and it has two advantages. You can see here that you can use this formatted method into your controller. Okay, now you don't need to write that method inside the application helper, and you can still manage your view code in better way. Okay, and this helper method keyword, this is a keyword, it makes this method formatted date available for views as well, and you can use this method inside your controller logic as well. For example, now you have formatted date defined in your controller, and if you want to use this method inside any of the code, like let's say you want to use this here, let's say date, formatted date, and student dot date of birth. Okay, so you can use this method here as well. Okay, so now you have two purposes with this helper method. You can use that inside an action controller action itself. Why? Just to serve some logics, and you can use this for views as well, because this helper method makes it available and ready for the views. Okay, so we saw the effect. Now, just one thing to recall here, that when you define a helper method into action helper, then the method is available for the control all the controllers in your application. And when you define a helper method into a controller specific helper, or into a resource specific helper, then that is available only for that controller. Okay, for example, as I explained yesterday as well, that if you define any helper method inside the application helper, okay, then that will be available for all the controllers available in your application. But if you define a helper method inside courses helper or projects helper or any resource or controller specific helper, then those helper methods only available for that resource or for that controller only. Okay, so similarly, if you define helper method in the application controller, then that helper method will be available for all the controllers available in your application, and every controller can use that helper method as a logic for that as well. Okay, so both are same ways. Okay, now one more thing regarding using helpers into controller, that since a helper is a module just like normal Ruby module, so if you want to use that helper methods not only on the views but also in your controller actions, then just like other modules, you can include any helper in your specific controller as well. For example, let's say if we have some methods defined in our application helper, then how we can use those methods inside our controller, that just copy that. And what you can do here, that you can do it something like, let's say, include, and then say include application helper. And now every method available inside the application helper will be invoked into your students controller, and then you can use that not only for the views purpose, but you can use them as a controller action logic as well. Okay, so that's it from this video. I hope you get better idea that how to create helper methods inside your controller. Okay, and how to include the entire helper file in your students controller. Okay, so that's all from this lecture. Thanks for watching this, and let's meet into the next lecture. Till then, tata, goodbye, take care, and stay safe.